Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Azzakye here. I'm going to be doing another lore reading for Conqueror's Blade for the season of Heilheim. Going to start off with the challenges, going to have a look at the campaign, and then finishing off with the lore books you get from the unit challenges. So, starting right up, we have Week 1, The Butcher. Stories about Harold the Butcher spread like wildfire among the Norsemen. And before long, the raging storms and beguiling waves of the sea brought with them Norse longboats. Venturing southwards, everyone had heard that a king had been crowned in uh, Oscillosis? Wow, that is going to. I'm going to butcher names today. The Norsemen that had before been scattered rallied under his banner and joined in the raid. The world trembled before them to the war cries of the Norse. Their fear can be their fears came to be. The raiders of the sea had come again with their longboats, their warriors hardened by the frigid lands of their home, and steeled by the yearning for Valhalla, made them fierce foes indeed. Week 2. Turbulent times. Harold was born to a lord of I Ursulus? Man, I'm gonna be like, let's see if I can just get Google to just tell me how to say this word. Nah, not even an actual word. All right, Orsil Orsilsis. I'm gonna go with Orsilsis. If it's wrong, tell me. Otherwise I'm just gonna keep butchering it. His father Sigard was a right coward, but Harold inherited his mother Asta Asta hmm. Asta's ferocity and fearlessness. He enjoyed fighting and adventuring out to sea, much like other of his people. That's bad English. Other of his much like others of his people. Yeah. The one person he looked up to the most was his half-brother, the reigning king of Orcelsis, Olaf. Olaf was many years Harold's senior and a massive Norse warrior. He retook Orcelsis from a foreign power the same year that Harold was born and became king. Following his ascension to the throne, he accepted the Welsh help to minimize the chance of the foreign power's retaliation. Then he implemented a series of policies which he enforced with a rod of iron in an attempt to unite the Norse. These choices came to be his undoing. Olaf soon met resistance from the commoners, for they still followed the old ways and refused to adhere to his new regulations. They believed that Olaf was in league with the Welsh and that he had betrayed Orcelsis. A chasm formed between the upper and lower parts of society, and that's when the foreigners struck anew, a battle that directly led to the disintegration of Olaf's rule. Week 3. Blood Debt. Harold, who was only 15 at the time, left home to support his brother Olaf. Huh? Did I read that wrong? Oh, okay, yeah, half-brother Olaf. To support his brother Olaf. While young, he displayed uh, astonishing military talent during the war against the foreign power. The two of them banded together and fought with great zeal, yet they were still unable to prevent Orcelsis' fall. They were forced to retreat, and Olaf fell in a great battle. Harold was forced to hide beneath his late brother's corpse to survive. Harold had lost everything, and so he chose to leave and bury his seething hatred deep. He was fully aware that he didn't yet possess the strength required to avenge Olaf. He set forth from Oscillosis and ventured south as a mercenary to a nation with lands as far as the eye could see. Week 4. The lands of Barcian. The lands of Barcian, the great eternal empire, spread out before him. The sight shook him to the very soul, and he felt a calling. Owing to his outstanding military experience, Harold soon became part of Barcian's royal guards, the Varangian Guards. While often tasked with campaigning across the land, the Varangian Guards also served as the royal family's guard. Unconventional for the time, most of its members were Norse mercenaries who earned plentiful remuneration. Rem, remun? Wow, I cannot speak English right now. Remuneration. Remuneration. Harold began amassing a fortune for himself and began studying Barcian Empire's advanced organizational structure. War was in his blood. His great mind and sheer bloodthirstiness made him rise among the ranks with ease, and he quickly came to lead the Varangians. He took part in nearly every one of Barcian's battles, where he slaughtered foes against the Emperor's will. Wow, that is bad English there. That is because how that sentence shouldn't read like that. Oh, okay, sorry. How it's implied is that he's going against the Emperor's, like, he is slaughtering foes. Um, he is slaughtering foes against the Emperor's will. No, he is slaughtering foes who are against the Emperor's will. So that is a poorly constructed sentence and can be very misleading. Or I mean, it could be interpreted either way, but in terms of sentence structure, that just leads to weird confusion. Earning himself the new title, the Butcher, the mere mentioning of which had the Empire's enemies cower in fear. Week 5. Path of Escape. But the rulers which naturally had trusted and which but the rulers would naturally not trust an outsider. The old emperor died in an accident, and a new one took his place. As a result, the captain of the Varangians, Harold, was framed and thrown into prison to weaken those still loyal to the old leader. That's when it hit him. This place that he had recognized as his second home had never truly accepted him. He would always be one of the Norse mercenaries, an unwelcomed outsider. His heart sank, and old memories of his brother's demise resurged. Guilt overcame him for ever being able to put Oscillosis and guilt overcame him for ever being able to put Oscillosis and past events into the back of his mind. Harold escaped during a coup. Staged by the old emperor's subordinates, he left Barcian behind with his wealth and ventured north. Little did Harold know that this was the last he could ever see of Barcian, for soon after a group of crazed heretics would crash through the gates, kill the emperor, and bathe Constantinople in flames. Harold, however, continued north with glory and wealth until he arrived at the plains of Roswild Yagslav. Yagslav? Yagslav or Yagslav? I'm gonna go with Yagslav. A great duke. Ros Roswild Roswild Yagslav. Yagslav. Yagslav? That sounds better. Instead of Yagslav, it's Yagslav. Yagslav. Yaxlab. His fame had grown, and so he succeeded in wooing the Duke's daughter. The Duke even encouraged him to return to Oscillosis and settle his brother Olaf's legacy. Week 6. Week 6. Pursuit of Plunder. A beach in the northeast part of Keltland. Ulvar and her followers managed to climb onto the shore following Roland's failed campaign to the south. Hey! Roland appeared again! So, for those that you probably listening in for the first time, Roland was the Thane of the Scourge. Scourge is an old legend that he basically took up the mantle of. So basically, he became a living legend. Came down from the north because his people were starving. This was back for the season of Snowstorm, which would be classified as the fifth season. Um, should be classified as the fifth season following the expedition of fire. So it's great to see that the lore pieces still mention parts of old lore, especially the Bastian Empire, also been mentioned multiple times as the Eternal Empire. So even in-game lore kind of works out. Although this does take a lot of inspiration from Harold Hardrada and his his own saga. It's very nice that parts parts of the in-game lore really do create its kind of its own lore. I mean, like it is its own lore, but yeah. Okay. Following Roland's failed campaign to the south, Ulvar led her men north in the hope to cross the strait, return to their homeland. Skane? Skan. Hmm. Skan or Skane? I'm gonna go with Skane. Yet fortune had not been at their side. A storm had struck, and they had drifted aimlessly at sea for days. But it would so happen that the goddess of fate sent Ulvar and her retinue to Geltland. They had no food reserves left, and so she bet everything on one bold move. She gathered her North warriors and struck at the Celtish people's sacred city, Quinn Ruins. Their attack came out of nowhere and took the Celtish unprepared. Ulvar managed to seize resources, and with these they sailed towards Valos, Valosis, Valosis, Valois, Valosis, Is, Valosis, Valois, Valosis. Before the Celtish had time to react, having reached Valosis, Ulvar once again sent her warriors into action, and they managed to get their hands on even more supplies in Arelica. Ooh, so Velocis and Arelica sail before the Keltland had time to react. Okay, so yep. So Keltland, Velocis goes down to the Velocians. Arelica is the Arelica is the play. Okay, so Velocis is okay. So it's the actually season of Paragon's location. Not really sure how all of these places map out on the world map that we currently have. Arelica ran one of the major cities that was attacked during the war between the Philistines and the Welsh, but here they're getting attacked by Ulvar. Uh, Ulvar wanted to bring their spoils back to the North's homeland. However, the Celtish and the people of Pholosis were hot on their heels, so this is a team up apparently. I mean, I don't expect the Celtlish and the Welsh to team up, but with the Flosians it's okay. They gathered at the border of Pholosis and began their pursuit. Okay, so yeah. Ulvar was stationed within an old camp they had used before, and before she knew it, they had been surrounded by claymores and Pholostians Pholos knights. That kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense. They should use Pholostian. They have used Pholostian before, so Pholostian knights would be much better here. By claymores, uh, by swords, I believe a better description would be warriors wielding claymores or um, claymore warriors or something like that would make much more sense. But then again, um, in game they're literally just called claymores, so I guess that makes sense. Um, Also, if that's true, if they use the claymores here in this sense, they could just use chevaliers here. Although, I mean, chevaliers does translate to a type to knight. While fierce warriors indeed, the Northmen were greatly outnumbered. Following a disastrous defeat, Ulvar abandoned their stolen stolen spoils and returned to their ships. With her remaining warriors, she prayed to the gods that the sky be clear and that they make it home in one piece. So that is week 6 on the pursuit. So what's really cool to mention here is that the attack on Quinn Ruin had a point because um, there was a game mode where they had the Norse attacking Quinn Ruins, and you had claymores defending it. A little bit different from how Quinn Ruins normally played out during its own season, back during the season of Highlander, where the Welsh would be defending it with longbows and squires, and you would be attacking alongside claymores. So that is really cool that they try to introduce maps to kind of match up with the lore in the game. I don't think many people would appreciate. I think many people don't realize or appreciate this fact, but still to be seen. So basically two main characters, Ulvar and Harold right now. So looks like we're gonna go back to Harold with this next piece. So week 7, King of Oscillosis. Meanwhile, in Oscillosis, Harold was currently occupied by mustering an army to assault Oscillosis. He heard news that his old comrade in arms in the Varangian Guard has scattered when the new emperor's reign began. Some were tilling the land, whereas others worked as guards for some other or for some lord or other. Others still had taken to banditry, but they banded together once more upon hearing of Harold's plan, becoming the butcher's own Varangian guards. Harold himself had gone to the far north, to where a tribe of loyal, courageous, and hot-blooded made their home, the so-called Whoa Heimdall. Heimdall's Huskars? They're called the Heimdall Huskars? That's the first. That's the first. So that's actually kind of cool. Um, so the Varangian gods have like the scale mail and the purple robe thing is very Byzantine-esque. They still kept their North style helmets and North style shield. I mean, they're all embroidered, so they're definitely of higher quality. The Varangian gods would have had actually more equipment styled to the aesthetics of the to the Byzantine Empire back in actual history. So it's a little bit inaccurate for the depiction of the Varangian gods as being as being depicted as so Norse-like this, but it's not completely wrong. It's not completely wrong either, um, as the Varangian Guards also had their own different divisions. So the Varangian Guards of the royal, um, the Varangian Guards of like the bodyguards for the Emperor would have the best equipment. So these guys will probably be like Varangian Guards of the city, or just regular Varangian Guards um, that would just be like low level mercenaries. So anyway, continuing on, he promised them land, food, and power, and in return they pledged themselves to him. With Harold at their head, the Varangian Guards and Huskarls conquered every North tribe that refused to submit, owing to his lifetime of warring and North defense. He knew that the only way in which to truly conquer these people was with force and savagery. His name, Harold the Butcher, spread to Oscillosis, and among the North a new king has ascended the throne in Oscillosis, a king with a thirst for blood. Following his conquest, Harold began setting up North city-states wherever he pleased, though a lack of technology and harsh environment prevented him from succeeding, and so he thought of his brothers Olaf and how he'd cooperated with the Welsh to get riches and technology. So it's important to note the Welsh are directly against the Phalocians and the Celtish at the time. At this time, anyway, or I mean, like they did fight. I mean, so I mean, I'm pretty sure the Welsh they'll end up fighting the Welsh as well, since like Welsh is a stand-in for England. Week 8 North conflict at another North settlement in the south of Oscillosis, having suffered a crushing defeat. Um, Ulvar led her remaining warriors home to Rilmore, but what met them was a town in distress where most were suffering from hunger or frostbite. Hearing of Harold in Celsius rekindled Olvar's hope, and she and her followers went to support the new king of the north. After some time in Harold's camp, Ulvar realized how Harold had been able to establish his rule so swiftly. He was a well-seasoned warrior indeed, but most importantly, he had the support of Wieland. Ulvar went livid. She knew full well what the cunning Southerners were capable of, and that they would never help without reason. They must be brewing a conspiracy. What's more, the way Harold bowed and scraped, scrapped, scraped, scraped to the Welsh envoys made her believe that he had long since betrayed the North's honor and become a lapdog for the Southerners. And so she left the city one night and returned once more to her broken homeland. Things should have gone on like this until the incident of the award ceremony. News that Harold had decided to receive an award from the Welsh spread, causing an uproar among the North, including Ulvar. That was to her proof that Harold had betrayed them, and what's more, the Welsh chose to hold the ceremony at one of the North temple, an act of blatant blasphemy. She gathered those North who opposed Harold's choice and declared war against him. Ul Ulvar knew full well that she would be hard pressed to win against the Butcher, especially seeing as he had the Welsh aid, but she saw no choice. She had to bet everything for her people's honor. The battle broke out near the temple. Ulvar and her warriors charged and were met by Harold and his Varangian Guards and The Huskarls let out a war chant and protected Harold, while the Varangians raised their giant axe and cut down their enemies with great force. Odin's berserkers and Sigrun's shield maidens refused to give in, so the two sides met like waves crashing against one another. And this here makes my blood boil because it's just crap. Okay, so just to update, they changed the names or the in-game names for these units. So now they're no longer called Odin's Berserkers or Sigrim's Shield Maiden. They're just called Berserkers and they're just called Shield Maiden. The law breaks when you change names like this. I mean, Heimdall's Huskarls also would be really cool. Huskarls names introduced just by itself, fine. It just makes it just gives so much personality when you use these identifiers, uh, when you use the name in its entirety. The name itself is very powerful, and if you play this game like I do, Odin Berserkers and Sigrid Sealed Maidens, you have I have so much experience with using those two units, and the names themselves I'm very attached to because I know what it refers to. But I mean, like, people will understand the reference and probably get it. Will probably still understand it. It's just, I just feel like a disconnect there. Just me personally. The fact that the names are different. Ah, um, that was week 8, week 9. Oh man, I gotta be right back in a second. I'm actually cooking food, and better finish this up real quick then. Week 9. Actually, we're not even halfway. We're not even like up to the actual books, which is going to probably take the longest. So I shouldn't have actually cooked food. So week 9, changing times. Ulvar suffered defeat and she was taken captive by Harold. However, she simply couldn't understand why the so-called butcher didn't end her life then and there. Instead, he took her to his camp, where she saw an entirely different city-state. Warriors clad in superior armor, practicing on a vast training field. Artisans scuttling hither and thither as they erect new defensive structures, warehouses filled to the brim with food and weapons. She had never seen anything like it before. However, the tens? However, the tens held the North Mark and I think it's supposed to be tents. Held the North marked and banners. She realized that Harold had never betrayed the North and that was only seeking what benefits he could for the North. Perhaps the only way the North would get enough food and clothing to combat hunger and cold would be to accept the Welsh help for the time being. Ulvar let out a heavy sigh. The old traditions were now a part of history. Battle could no longer be won simply by means of courage. Many of her old comrades in arms had already fallen in battle due to her past mistakes, but those still standing, she couldn't simply lead them into a dark abyss. While unwilling, she was forced to admit that Harold was right. Perhaps he would be able to reunite them once more. Did I do a reading of, oh man, now I feel like I've missed something. Okay, so what, so what this implies is that Ulvar was the main character during the season of Northmen, which I'm getting the feeling I didn't actually read the lore or I've forgotten the lore about the Norsemen, wonder which makes me wonder what the story there would be because I can't remember it for the life of me. And I definitely would love to go back and find it, but I don't think I have a recording. I think I actually started during the season of Dynasty, which is really sad actually because that would be this because context clues are telling me that Ulvar was very important um had a lot of lore in the Northman season, and it's also implied here that Ulvar um Ulvar led the original raids during the Northmen after Roland's failed campaign. So Odin Berserkers and Sigurd's Shield Maidens belong to her. So she would have definitely been very important during she would have been definitely very important during in the lore for Northmen. So I'm actually kind of upset that I didn't start reading the lore pieces until after Dynasty. Um and we'll never get those back. Do mind that a lot of these lore pieces are now gone and we'll never get those back. So sad, sad face. Um Did I finish this? Yes. While unwillingly, she was forced to admit that Harold was right. Perhaps he would be able to reunite them once more. So this is cool. Um. Whoa. What did I? Okay. Yeah. So what's really cool about all of this is that Roland. So Roland was also a Norseman. He came down as the Thane of the Scourge. Roland was also a Norseman. Came down as a Scourge. Tried to raid and plunder well, tried to lead his people to get away from the like again from the harsh storms of winter. So again, starving. Ulvar as well came down from the north to help, well, to plunder as well, and again try to survive their hunger and cold. So in this timeline, Harold left the North, went to went as far as Barcian, which should be Bartholia. So the so realistically, the locations of Roland's campaign was basically around Angolia, um, Osteria. So Ulva should have been active around the Osteria region, although I'm not sure exactly the location of each of the places would be, like Keltland, the Welsh, and the Velocians in this case. So there's so much lore here that kind of mimics the history that it's inspired by, but also I really do love the writers who write these, and I'm really sad that I do not have the lore pieces recorded for seasons 1 to 6 actually. Since I only started to read these wholeheartedly during the Dynasty season, which should be season 7. But let's finish up this weekly one. Then we got the unit books. Um, so week 10, Land of the North. Ulvar entrusted her warriors to Harold and sailed a ship to the depths of the Beryl Sea alone. This free North warrior was unable to betray her own pride and submit to the Welsh. Her unyielding soul would return to Valhalla, where she would reunite with her old companions and dine with the gods. Harold let out a deep sigh when he heard the news that Ulvar had departed. He gazed north and raised his mead horn in silence. All the while he issued a secret order to his men to build warships, store food, sharpen their axe, and kill every single of the Welsh spies. The time had come to plunder and fight. Just you wait, your pitiful scum of the south. The North rage will bathe red your shores once more. The North Rage will bathe red. Wow, that is really bad English as well. The North Rage will bathe your shores red once more. That's the sentence you want to make, but it's all the words are there, it's just in the wrong order. Also, this is really sad because Ulvar left because Harold, in this case, she views Harold submitting to the Welsh as um, a betrayal of the tradition of Norse. But it's most likely and again it's like submitting to another submitting to another is not the Nor submitting to another is not really the Norse way, especially not to foreigners. And that's classic for like a lots of civilizations. Never really submitting to foreigners. But what's painful is that after she leaves, Harold enacts his plan to start slaughtering the Welsh. Oh man. Ah, that's brutal. Oh man. Now we have 3 whole books. Hopefully they are not too long. You do get to see the words here, and I hope you guys enjoy. This might be an hour long, and my food's gonna be on the stove for an hour, so I'm just gonna double check that real quick. All right, let's get the show on the road. We've got Huskarls 1. General Hyman. I really want to man, the word, like, the name like that just gonna kill me as I keep saying it. General Him, I want to say Hyman, ordered that the Bodun River would be placed under martial law. Before we knew what was happening, we were hauled off to the new fort at the riverbank. There they gave us armor, weapons, and supply. We were divided into groups of 3 and forced to take turns to stand on duty. No one dared to ask what was going on, for we soon learned that Captain Matthew was a strict man without mercy. The vast majority of the Wieland soldiers are of the impression that their enemies are either heavy cavalry or barbarian berserkers. So heavy cavalry would prefer to the Phalocians, barbarian berserkers obviously the Norsemen. None of us understood why Bodum River, which stretched onto the sea, was placed under martial law, nor what enemy might attack from the water. Like, you already understood barbarian berserkers, so how do you not know your Norseman enemy so far? They ride on longboats and they will literally, like, come on. But from Captain Matthew's solemn expression, we could tell that they would not go down easily. Is this the same Matthews that we read about the Phalocian? Man, I gotta go back and take a look at my recording for that one. Could be the same Captain Matthews that was extraordinarily ruthless during the season of Paragon. So if I remember correctly, it was the maidens ones that we read that Captain Matthews killed an entire church or something. We waited and waited, but no. Whoa, hang on, yet. We could tell that they. But from. Let me just start from the beginning. But from Captain Matthews' solemn expression, we could tell that they would not go down easily. Yet Bodum River remained peaceful in the coming days. We waited and waited, but no enemies came. Boss, what are we guarding against? Archer Charlin asked on the 7th day when he couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. Charlin is our best longwoman, and he fell dozens of Phalocian cavalry, but I knew something that the others knew. I knew something that the others knew. Okay, didn't knew. So Again, English is bad there. Something that gave him the bravery to ask what everyone wanted to know. He was Captain Matthew's cousin. Matthew, however, a strict and merciless man who treated everyone equally, had never acknowledged the fact. Don't ask questions, you just remain on guard as you're supposed to. Matthew responded, but boss, how are we supposed to prepare properly if you don't tell us what's going on? Jarlin wasn't ready to give up, and yet we're honestly all confused. Naturally, the rest of us broke into a whisper in response. It had the desired effect, and Captain Matthew's expression softened somewhat. Fine, but I'm not entirely certain myself, he said. Merchant ships have been vanishing in the sea where the river flows out to sea. Okay, so what a better sentence would have been merchant ships have been vanishing where the river flows out to sea. Because like it's already implied that they've been vanishing in the sea next to the river, near the river, near the river where it flows out to sea. So, okay. The army has searched the coast but turned up nothing so far, except that a few villages have been raided. There was not a single survivor. More like more likely than not, it's just a band of roaming pirates, Shalin said, and shrugged. Pirates have their own way. They'll steal from the common people, but avoid the army like the plague. Captain Matthew threw a glance in the direction of the river's end, then continued, I'm afraid things aren't so simple. A warship was found grounded on an underwater bank. It is long, with a carved dragon head at the bow, and a huge mast. That's impossible, Jarlin sputtered in surprise. The other soldiers began talking among themselves, and an air of uncertainty permeated the room, as Captain Matthew's words had shocked us. Few took notes of the change that came over Charlin. The more seasoned soldiers had all heard of the great war that had taken place in the south a couple of years prior, and they knew who was behind it. North soldiers disguised as the Scourge. That's really cool. Man, I'm kicking myself not reading the lore back during the Scourge now, because Snowstorm, Norseman, and Heilheim very intertwined, very 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 intertwined right now, because man, actually kicking myself. The Northmen would still be scattered. How would they still be powerful enough to raid the sea? Perhaps there are remnant soldiers from the war? It might not mean anything. While that was what Charlie said, his expression betrayed him. Captain Matthews had nothing more and simply looked towards the sea. Worry painted on his face. Um, Also, just a note, like if you're told that a village had no survivors, how big was that village? How many pirates are you talking about? Like, the size and scale of these things, there must be survivors. The only reason that there would be no survivors is that if the entire place was surrounded, and that is a difficult task, the larger a settlement is. Although, I mean, technically, if the settlement also was kind of like trapped in on itself, like the walls would, like if you had control of the gates and stuff, you could eventually slaughter everyone. So that is also another point. But still, that's still like, how big are we talking about? At night, a dark time. So sorry, Pascal's 2. At night, a dark time came with the storm. Ferlin was on duty on that day. Night had yet to fall. Yet, wow, night had not yet fallen. Okay, no, I was reading that wrong. Night had not yet fallen, but he was overcome with boredom as he kept watch from the lookout tower from where he could see a city in the distance. Bah! When will this boredom end? Charlin cursed. The soldiers in the city could enjoy themselves during their leisure time, but those in the fort had only the river as company. Their mission, to guard it, had turned into a foam of torment, especially for the younger soldiers. What's more, it had already been 23 days, and the north had yet to be seen. Charlin curled up in the corner with his longbow. He pulled up the collar of his linen shirt as he gazed up at the cloudy sky and sighed. Yeah, honestly, being a sentry sucks. Spend most of your days just standing around looking at it in the distance. You'd have to find some things to occupy yourself with. Not very many things to occupy yourself with. I mean, nowadays you have all these games and stuff. Probably find a book, write a book, do something, probably work out, probably practice your. I can understand why people back in the day probably like trained so much because there was nothing else to do. Charlin couldn't remember when he fell asleep, but it was already midnight when thunder woke him. The storm had turned the night pitch black as rain pelted the fort's wall. Shakily he rose to his feet before taking the oil lamp and going out. The cold wind and raindrop battered him, and the trembled visibility. A bolt of lightning streaked. Sorry, hang on, wait. Battered him, and the trembled visibly, should have been not the trembled visibly. A bolt of lightning streaked through the sky and illuminated the river's surface. What he saw made him tremble worse still. At the end of the river, he saw a dark tide surging towards them, thousands of warships in tight formation, upon which rode slaughterous demons. Enemy attack! Charlin roared at the top of his lung as he pounded at the alarm with all his might. Fires quickly lit all over the fort, and footsteps of soldiers hurriedly hither and thither overshadowed even the storm. Fire! Captain Matthew roared to the archers standing by the loopholes. Swarm of arrows surged towards the ensuing dark tide, but they weren't enough to stop the warships from advancing. Captain Matthew didn't realize that the archers had had no effect until the enemy was almost ashore. At the I think it's supposed to be actually at the bow, not the bow. What am I saying? At the bow of each ship, North warriors were holding up a shield wall of round shields, blocking most arrows, and the arrows that hit barely made these fierce warriors flinch. In their right hand they held engraved war axes, and their gaze were fixed upon the fortress soldiers. Don't panic. Open the long gates. Don't panic! Open the log gate! Not long gate. Captain Matthew roared to suppress the panic. He strode towards the chamber with the gates mechanism and cut off a bayonet. A wooden gate upon the river immediately flung open, and huge floating logs flowed down the river straight towards the North warships. Seeing the Northmen falling into the water brought them back to their senses. They too began working to open more gates to let out more logs. Many of the warships were smashed to pieces, and many warriors fell into the water. The Welsh warriors at the fortress raised their bows anew and aimed them at the warriors treading water. This time they had no shield to protect them. The arrow pierced their bodies, and the water quickly turned red. Captain Matthew let out a sigh of relief. He thought the battle was over. He thought that the battle was all but over. That's a bit contradictory. He sighed. He let out a sigh of relief. He thought that the battle was all but over. Okay, a bit strange there. Alright, Huskal 3. The soldiers in the nearby city hadn't seen what was going on the Bodom River. They were all fast asleep when the North attacked and didn't wake up until they heard the call for help. What's going on? A drowsy soldier asked as he rubbed his eyes. Enemy assault! A few silhouettes could be made up below the wall. They were almost completely hidden by the darkness, and most seemed to be wounded. Enemy assault? The guard asked in surprise. Yes, Northmen came up the river. They've occupied a fort and have broken through our defenses. What? Captain Matthew survived. The last time we picked up, Captain Matthew survived, but if this is the same fort, we've just lost the fort already. What? The North, that's impossible, the guard still didn't quite believe his ears. Just see for yourself. They pointed towards the east, towards Bodom River. The guard looked and saw flames covering the river. A few of the forts were ablaze and ready to topple. The storm raging above was colored red by the flames. You see that? Let us in and prepare to defend. The North are coming! The soldiers roared. Open the gate and let them in! The guard didn't hesitate. They manned the wheels and the heavy gate slowly opened, and when thunder struck and lightning struck, revealing what lurked behind the silhouette, rows upon rows of Northmen stood silently in the raging storm, shields and weapons at the ready. They were clad in black chain armor with horned helmets atop their head, now red from battle. As they stood there, the storm washed away the blood of fallen Wielanders. No! Shut the gate! No! The guard howled in despair, but it was already too late. This force, seemingly made up of warriors even larger than your average Norse, swarmed into the city. Screams of pain and terror soon reverberated through every corner. A few hours before, Captain Matthew had led his soldiers to mop up the remainder and let out more logs to sink as many ships as they could. But just as they breathed out a sigh of relief, the tides changed. The North, who should have all but drowned in the river, made it ashore. The Wheelish abandoned their longbows and draw their blades, preparing to defend Bodon River with their lives, while all elite Welsh soldiers they couldn't prevent fear from gripping their heart as they stood there facing the Northmen. Demons from the harsh north, towering hulks of men wearing horned iron helmets, unlike the bare-chested north of the stories. They were dressed for war, sturdy chainmail, unique round shields, and runic war axes that radiated savagery. They clustered around a tall leader who exerted an invisible pressure that made the Wheelish sweat. Captain Matthew fixed his nervous eyes upon the tall figure. His lifetime of warring told him that the man was terribly dangerous. Even so, retreating never occurred to him. While they were vastly outnumbered, he had to stall them as best he could, buy enough time for Chalin to warn the nearby city about the raid. Matthew let out a fierce roar as he charged together with the other Wheelish soldiers. Harold tore his axe free from the necks of the last Wheelish soldier. He looked at the pile of dead corpses before him with cold eyes, then towards the city in the distance. A few Northmen walked out of the shadows. Wow. Okay, I'm reading this too fast, actually. Charge together with the other Wheelish soldiers. So, what's really cool here is that you can imply that the trailer for Heilheim was the battle for the fort. So that is really cool. That's really cool. So you can imply that the trailer was the battle for the fort. Continuing on, shadows scaring Chalin's body, which they threw to the ground. Captain Matthew was in utter disbelief. Never would he have guessed that this seemingly brutish North leader would have seen through his every move from the very beginning. Huskars! We move towards the city as planned. Harold commanded. The warriors behind him quickly went into motion and changed into Welsh armors. Oh my god! And it's here yet again. So, big reveal right now. The Welsh troops, soldiers that went to warn the city were actually Norsemen dressed up to open the gates. Oh, man. And so it was most of the city had already been plundered when reinforcements finally arrived. The Northmen had come with the storm and had left the same way. What remained of them was but two terrifying names, Harold and the Huskarls. Names that would haunt the few survivors' nightmare for the rest of their lives. General Hyman slumped down motionless in his chair upon hearing the news. He knew full well that his unauthorized diplomacy had been what released the demons. Demons that would bring judgment and doom upon the people of the South. So really cool, you know. Apparently, General Hyman is the person that provided the arms, weapon, and supplies to Harold, and so it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool that the books here are um, not about events during not events that are part of the campaign, but instead um, there was it's telling us what happened after, and this is really cool because when I was reading the campaign weekly lore pieces, I was kind of unsatisfied that we'd end up with Harold here, not really getting any glimpse of what happened, well, what will happen, and kind of semi implying that we're gonna get another season of Harold. But these books kind of clarify that these books are kind of like the epilogue of Harold's rise to well, actually, so it's like there's no mid story in this case. Kind of like it's kind of, maybe there will be an epilogue in the Varangian Guards, but we got basically the entirety of the weekly explaining Ulvar and Harold. Harold's like preparation for the war. The Huskarls book 1 to 3 kind of basically implied the start of Harold's raid on the south, and we'll see what the Varangian Guard books will tell us now. So, Varangian Guards 1. Historians have divided the reasons for how the Vastian Empire could stand tall for thousands of years into different schools of thought. The Sovereign School believed it to be because the emperors of Vastians were wise leaders whose systems ushered its continued prosperity. The geographic school argues that it was due to its advantageous position where trade could flow between the north and the south, part of the continent. Oh, yeah, flow between the north and the south part of the continent, bringing Bastian riches and wealth. The unreliable um, the, theologians, 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 I think it's like that, however, were adamant that Bastian flourished as it was protected by the gods. Oh, yeah, right. Theologians are priests. Yet, or those that believe in a higher power, sorry. Yet, the only ones able to give a true answer to the question are those common people of Bastian who have been threatened by war. The Varangian Guards. This force was commanded by the royal family and comprised North immigrants. They were the Empire's strongest sword and shield and fought for Bastion to remain in power. The origin of the Varangian Guards and Bastion Empire can be tracked back to a time long ago. They were the first foreign reinforcements to support Bastion from Roswald. Oh, okay. So they were the first foreign reinforcements to support Bastion from Roswald. So Roswald was the Duke that um, Harold met after his. Wow. Okay, hang on. This is really confusing. Roswild must be the last name in this case. So, interesting. Unless they reuse the name, because that feels like a long time ago in a single person's lifetime doesn't seem like a long time. Having defended Constantinople, they remained in Bastion and were formed into a mercenary legion under the royal family command that served as palace guards. They were the absolute elite of the Bastion forces at the time. These fierce infantry unit were entrusted by the emperor to fight alongside Bastion royal cavalry. I love the Bastion royal cavalry. Also, it's implied, um, it's implied that the outriders of the season of tyranny are actually the Barcian cavalry, um, are actually the Barcian cavalry of the Eternal Empire. So that's really cool. Um, maybe not the royal cavalry, but maybe part of the expedition into Barcian. I'm willing to I'm willing to put down that it's implied that they were part of the Barcian Empire and fought for the Barcian Empire. So it's really cool that a little bit tidbits here, a little bit tidbits there. It's all kind of wraps around together in this whole mixture of lore. They were fully clad in steel armor and wielded a North heavy axe, a rumbaya, a rumbaria. Whoa, no word I've never seen before. Oh, okay. All right. So this is a Thracian weapon. Um, Not unlikely to appear in in Byzantine history because they are very close to Thracian. The locations of Thracian were north of Macedonia, um, or like modern day Greece anyway. Long been taken over. The Thracian people were long been taken over, before the Eastern Roman Empire, and so um, really cool weapon. So it's a reverse curve. It's basically a reverse curve. So if you imagine an actual scythe, so the scythe would face so would curve away from you if you were to hold the blade. Very effective cutting tool, but very difficult to align the edge, mainly because mainly because it will naturally um, it will naturally try to unalign itself if you don't have it dead on. So there's that. And a round shield. Although, I mean, very popular at the time of the Byzantine Empire was the kite shield. Um, was a large kite shield, but most of Europe adopted the kind of large kite shield at that time, eventually growing smaller in size. You would get the men-at-arms kite shield. So realistically, they would have a larger version of the spear sergeant shields or the loyal guard shields. These massive North warriors were superior to all other infantry at the time, and with their skillful tactics, they helped the emperor conquer great masses of land. At the height of the Bastion Empire's power, a young Northman from Oscillosis arrived at Constantinople. His homeland has fallen, and his family had been slaughtered by foreign invaders. Fueled with hatred, he traveled the world until he stood before Constantinople's Constantinople's massive gates. No one knew that this young man would soon become the captain of the Varangian Guards, nor did they know that he would gain victory after victory in the emperor's name and earn himself a nickname, the Butcher. So this is really cool. So what we get here with the Huskals so far was the epilogue of, well, I mean, kind of the epilogue and the beginning of Harold's adventure south. And here in the Varangians, we're starting off with the history, kind of dead center of the creation of Harold, as getting the name the Butcher. So, Varangian Guard 2, the battle between the mountain is still vivid in my memory. Blood sprayed everywhere and limbs littered the grounds, and the wailing was almost the worst. Soul-rendering cries of death. It felt as if I could hear God himself lament. That's when I finally realized why the city people called them demons. My legs grew so soft that I could barely stand when the towering North came towards me with their massive axes, and it wasn't until he patted me on the shoulder that we were on the same side. Shame tore at me. I had seen plenty of gore during my years as an army scribe, but it is my honest opinion that even the most seasoned of veterans would pee themselves at the gruesome sight. Yeah, very actually quite common. Um, it was actually quite common for soldiers in, um, or not common. It was described that the Norsemen mercenaries were very difficult to fight with because they would chant or um, they would scream during battle, and it could be heard. It's very distinct. Not to mention, there's also rumors apparently them performing um, Norse rituals in at uh, Norse rituals, not on the battlefield, but like time when like outside the battles during their time just probably guarding the city or during their leisure time. Not to mention they were avid drinkers, loved loved to drink apparently. I couldn't help myself but rejoice. It was fortunate indeed that the Emperor had spared no expense in recruiting these Norse warriors from Bastion. For Bastion, God only knows what terrors would have befallen us if they were our enemies. Army Chronicles, Peter Dukas. If cavalry had not existed, there would be no one in the entire land of Azalon. That's a first. Azalon, probably actually mentioned during the season of Blood of the Empire, but you don't have any of that crap, unfortunately. That could have stood against the Varangian Guards. The first time I heard someone say that, I laughed myself hoarse. I figured it was another silly rumor. Many are those who talk about war yet know not the first thing about it. While I myself am a knight serving the Bastion Empire, I did not believe myself to be inferior to the North wildlings. In close quarter combat, war requires that tactic and soldiers go hand in hand. I was sure that others were simply frightened at these brute size, and so it was only natural that we requested a formal drilling exercise before the Emperor himself and other nobles right there before the palace. Tell you the truth, that was one of the few times that I've dismounted my steed to fight in close combat. I did so once before during a campaign in the west, and still I felled many a foe. But these Northmen were different. They towered above us as soon as our feet hit the ground, as they stood there in their chain armors and horned helmets, giant axes in their hands. They were at least one head taller than us, and much wider, and those eyes, it was the gaze of those with a thirst for battle. I thought to myself that perhaps the stories weren't completely unfounded. After all, even so, we of the Royal Cavalry never retreat. Even unmounted, we cry, "Long live the Emperor!" and charge straight at them, gaining ourselves an honorable defeat. Yes, defeat. I do now truly recognize their might. While the strongest infantry in all of Azolan, Azalan, Azolan, Azalan, Azalon, Azalon, might be an overstatement, but certainly not by far. The Emperor even awarded them for a task well done, and they cheered. Bah! The greedy wildling. But since that day I rarely left my steed, not because I was afraid, but because I felt more attached to him than ever. I had to ride as often as I could to calm it. That's it, murmurs of the knight captain. Run! The blasted Emperor has unleashed his barbarians. There's no way we can continue our business. I implore you to let the monks go, and let them go on their pilgrimage to that damned holy place. I know that many of you might find that hard to do. This is a highly lucrative business. After all, the treasure the monks themselves carry are worth a fortune, not to mention the ransom paid by this and that nation. But this time it's different. I implore you to heed my warning. If the barbarians come, things won't end well. As far as I know, Grunth of the Greenfield has already paid the price. He refused when they came for the pilgrims, unwilling to give up that which filled his purse with ease, and so he made the worst mistake of his life. He led his men in a charge against the Varangian Guards. Nevertheless to say, not a single one of them still draws breath. By the time I reached Greenfield, there was nothing there but corpses and carrions. So I implore that you clear your mind and escape while you can. Baldwin Blackhand. Baldwin Blackhand. No idea who that character is. Maybe he'll come up again. Varangian Guard 3. Captain's letter. It is high time we leave this rotten place, my friend. Marcian may still possess power, but this is not our home. They will never truly accept us. Barbarians. Ever since the old emperor's demise, the new emperor has been attempting to weaken our influence. First, he ordered that we are not allowed within the palace. Then he lowered our wages. We will no longer be able to amass wealth as we fight for Bastion. This is an outright insult to our honor. We are born free, revere the strong, and long for war and adventure. We swore our allegiance to the emperors of old, as they promised us riches and wealth. But our once glorious benefactor is no more. A dirty, filthy, rotten to the core has taken his place, and he is not deserving of our loyalty. I know how you feel, humiliated and betrayed. I did too. At first, I was overcome with fury when the new emperor cast me into prison. I was angry to be at that despicable man's mercy, and it was not until I escaped and slew the bastard that my anger began to dissipate. Oh, okay, so Harold killed the emperor in this case. I think he actually killed him in history as well. Not entirely sure about that. Really need to read the saga again. We are Northmen. We used to roam the seas and plunder to our heart's content. Death on the battlefield is an old friend of ours. We will not bow our heads and accept a fate given to us by others. I know that you have been forced to banditry or serve as bodyguards for some lord or others. But that is not a fate befitting a Norseman, nor one of the Varangian Guards. I give you this one opportunity to meet me at the plains of Roswild and reform the Varangian Guards. I promise you wealth, honor, and the right to plunder. I shall lead you to Valhalla when the time comes. Return to me, my Northman. May the gods guide our hands. Harold the Butcher. And that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed that lore reading. I did indeed. It's been an hour of talking, and I'm a little bit sore throat. I'm gonna probably go eat now. But very exciting to see a lot of the lore kind of pieced together from the inspiration from Harold Hardrada's journey, Harold Hardrada's sagas himself. This lore reading, especially, has really reminded me that the lore needs to be remembered and should be recorded. It is sad that all of these all of these lore pieces will disappear by the end of the season, and it is terrifying to think that no one's going to record this. So hopefully I will continue. I do have Dynasty, I do have Tyranny, Highland, and the Paragon seasons. I think, and now including Helheim. So I will continue doing these lore readings. I love to do these, and I love the fact that this mixture of a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of history, and it gives you a taste of some of the history that exists out there. And I do hope that people will go back and take a look at Harold Hardrada, the probably the real life inspiration. Not real life inspiration, since like it's been ages since he died, but his stories are very entertaining, and he lived quite a, how to say, adventurous life. But again, I do love these lore pieces, especially the books. The books ones are the best. They do give us lots of different perspectives, and quite sad. Captain Matthews dead. I do think we did read about Captain Matthews at a different time during the season of Paragon books. We'll have to go back and check. My memory of the Paragon books are not that great. My memory in general is not that great, but um, nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this lore reading, and um, I'll catch you again another day. But other than that, my name's Azzakye. Have a nice day. Bye now.